Hi, and welcome to Art with Mrs. Alston. I am going to be combining a couple of things that we have been learning over the past couple weeks, and we're going to make an Egyptian styled self portrait. So, what I have here is I have a 9 by 12 brown construction paper, and originally, what we wanted to do was actually make our own papyrus paper using some brown paper. But because of the world right now with the pandemic, we're doing things just a little bit differently, a little bit safer, a little bit easier. And so we're just using our brown paper instead of some papyrus paper. And then I have half a sheet of drawing paper. So this sheet is 6 by 9. There we go. It is a 6 by 9 sheet. So it's going to be half half of your construction paper. And I've got this one in white, and that's just because we're going to be drawing and coloring, and we can do a variety of things, whether colored pencils or crayons, and it'll just show up better on the white, and then we'll eventually cut it out and glue it down to our sheet. The first thing that I do want to do, like this is exactly how I would step it through for any of my students. I would actually put our paper right here, and I would try to even it out as mostly as possible. I mean, a little crooked isn't going to be that big of a deal. It just kind of enhances it, but get it as, about as even, eyeball it as you can. And then what I am going to do is I'm going to draw a circle in each one of my corners. And I like to tell the kids to use these little marks on almost any of their drawings or anything that they're doing, just because it gives you a reference point. You're able to see how far away you want something. So I've made those marks, and now I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm going to make sure that my ruler passes through both of those spots. And we could actually measure down and measure in and do this that way, but this art project will look fine, and this is a lot less time consuming for some little kids. So if I have older kids that I was teaching this to, middle school, I would probably make them measure, just because that's a really good skill to have. And that would just be measuring down in 3 different areas. You want to do at least 3, because you want your ruler to go through all 3 of them. And if it can't go through all 3 of them, then you've probably got one of your dots wrong. But this is easy. I've got my 2 dots from where my paper was. I'm going to hold my ruler here in the middle. And so for some kids, their hands are small. So what I tell them to do is I tell them to walk down the ruler. So we just walk down, and we're going to go all the way up. And so I'm going to do the same with the bottom. I'm going to line those 2 dots up, and then I'm going to walk my fingers down. Now my hands are definitely big enough to not have to walk down, but it's just good. It's a good reminder, because some hands are small, and what happens is if you're doing your line, you can move your ruler. That's the reason why we want to walk our fingers down and hold it to the paper. Once again, I'm going to the edge to edge. And you'll see the reason why when we get farther along into this. And I'm making these lines dark. They would say, shouldn't we draw light? And we do have this nice little chant at school where we say, draw light until you get it right, or draw darker, or trace with a marker. And drawing light is always a good idea. That way it's easier to correct or alter or change. I really love the idea that there are no mistakes. There's just happy accidents. And we can turn those accidents or mistakes into something beautiful. And I try to teach my students that. So the reason why we want it spaced out to fit this piece of paper in is because when we cut this out, we're going to be butting it up against one of our sides. This is going to be what our Egyptian self-portrait will be on. So we're going to do a profile because remember, the Egyptian 2D art was drawn in profile. The face was in profile. The eye was as if it was staring straight at you. And then the body, once again, is looking straight on. We're not going to get the whole body in. We're just doing a portrait. So the first thing that I am going to do is, here we go with draw light until you get it right. So the first thing I'm going to do is just very lightly draw a bunch of circles. And the reason why I do this is because somewhere in here is a really good circle. So I could trace where my circle is and get rid of all those lines that kind of make my circle wonky. Either way, I'm actually going to leave it just like this. And then I am going to draw a light cross through it. I'm going to extend the bottom, and the one in the middle is just going to be there. These are going to be my reference points. These are my guiding points. Okay, so if things look just a hair different, it is because after recording that last video, we had some technical difficulties in the middle. There was some skipping and jumping, and I'm not sure what happened. So I'm just going to record the drawing of our self-portrait. I've redrawn my circle. I've got my guidelines. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to, so I've divided it in half, and then I'm going to divide the bottom half again. And what that's going to tell me is it's going to tell me where my noses starts. My noses, I only have one. Where my nose starts and where my nose ends. This is also where I start talking through, especially if I'm teaching somebody, talking through those 5 elements of art, or shape, not art, shape. And that would be a circle, a dot, a straight line, a curved line, and an angled line. And of course, you know, curved lines can look like all sorts of different things. But it's knowing that I can use these to draw pretty much anything. It just helps break things down. So when my children are trying to draw something difficult, I tell them to stop looking at the image as an image and look at it for the elements of shape. Where do you see curved lines? Where do you see straight lines? And then just draw those lines. So like I mentioned earlier, I like to kind of use little dots to tell my students and to tell myself even where I want something. So that's what these lines are. They're going to tell me exactly where I want something. I'm actually going to start the bridge of my nose a little bit above that line, and I'm going to curve it down to this line. And that's about right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself another guideline, because I want to do our mouth, our chin, and that's not a straight line down. I don't want to draw it just straight down. We have a slight angle. So I'm going to draw a diagonal line right there. So I've got my nose. I have my baseline for my chin, because my chin's going to come right about here. And these are, once again, just guidelines. This is going to help me. And I'm going to change these or erase these so that we have more of a uniform look. So I have my nose, and now I'm going to do my mouth. So halfway between here, my mouth is probably going to end right about here. So I can put like little lines again. So that looks about right. So I would like my mouth maybe to fit somewhere in that spot. And these are just going to be some curved lines. I'm just going to work with some curved lines. So curve and a curve, because your lips kind of come out. And then I'm going to curve them back in. And we are going to trace this with a marker. So I'm actually only going to erase at the very end. So I'm going to make sure unless something's going to hinder me from drawing what I need to, I'm just going to leave it, because then I can erase it all at once and I don't need to worry about accidentally erasing my lines. So now from here, I don't like my nose so much, so I'm going to kind of curve it down here, give it some more definition. And then my chin, I think I'm fine with my chin. My nose definitely protrudes out. Maybe not in real life, but on my drawing it definitely does. So keep in mind, Egyptian art, our face is in profile, so now we're going to draw that eye as if it's looking right at me. And I'm actually going to use this guideline right here. My eye is going to be half on top and half on bottom. And I am just going to draw a rainbow, so a curved line, and then a frowny face, another curved line, and have them meet up. On my other drawing, my eye is very big, and that is how I left it. So I'm gonna give some definition in here, draw my pupil, and then Egyptians, they seem to always have some dark lines around their eyes. So I'm going to add that because I'm going to darken that in. So from here, I could go ahead and put my ear in, okay, coming down. The ear doesn't have to be necessarily really fancy. I think I've got mine coming too far maybe into my head. So it's just there. So there's my ear, and I'm going to take a moment to actually erase part of that because that'll be confusing when I go to trace with a marker. All right, and keep in mind, ears all look different, so we can draw them. I could have given it a bigger clamshell up here. Woo! There we go. So it just, if you want to look at your own ear and see what you want to do, that is perfectly fine. That is a good idea. So I've got my nose, I've got my mouth, I have my eye. From here, we're going to go ahead and add our neck. We start at the back of the head, and remember, your neck is actually a lot wider than some kids want to draw it. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a straight, kind of a straight line across, and that's once again just another guideline, because from here I am going to put my shoulders, and so I'm going to use that guideline. I probably want my shoulder out to about there, and I'm going to crop it off the page over here. And what I mean by crop is it's just going to continue off the page, which it does. I don't have as much room. So from here, let's see. So if I'm looking right about the middles here, using those guidelines, and so I'm going to do a curve to my dot and then a curve back up. And right now what I'm doing is I'm creating that pectoral jewelry, which I don't see a lot of. I mean, I see a lot of it here, but you don't see a lot of the lines. I would ask my students to create a pattern for the pectoral jewelry. We could look at a lot of different, and we have looked at a lot of different Egyptian art where you can see some very beautiful pectoral jewelry and decorations. And I am just gonna do a simple pattern because that's what's in my last one, where we're gonna just go with lines radiating out, kind of like the sun. All right. So from here, we're also going to create the headdress. So we want the pectoral, and we're going to put on a headdress, and we can do any headdress that you would see in Egyptian art. So for our headdress, I am going to do the double crown, And so the double crown it combines the red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt, and it symbolized the joining of the two lands, and the pharaoh's control over the two lands. So that's what I'm going to put on because my children will actually recognize it. I'm going to kind of turn my paper because it's going to be easier for me to do this curve. I always tell my children, move the paper, don't try to move your hand. There's not a right way to this. I've worked with teachers who have told their students that their paper should never move from here, that you should be able to draw whatever you want from this point. But that's not how I draw. And so we need to find what's comfortable for us. So I'm going to start with the headdress. It's a curved line. And I'm actually going to just draw it straight through my ear, even though it's not going to go through my ear in the end. I'm going to erase that part. And how would I do that right now? That way I don't accidentally use marker on it. So this is where I was talking. If you need to erase, go ahead and erase. So I've got that nice curved line, and then the headdress kind of comes out like this, and it swoops up and off the page. And same with back here. We got a slight curve. We got a slight curve as we go up. And so that's the red section. And the white section is the one that's on the inside. And so I'm not going to see much of it because most of it's going to be cropped off. And whoops. And then it's got that swirl right there. Now I'm not going to, because we're going to cut this out. I'm going to cut that off. That would be no fun to try to cut out, just the thickness of a pencil. And I am going to trace this with a marker. I do have a Sharpie, and that's typically what we have in schools. I'm going to go ahead and actually come in and take out a little bit of this, just so that it doesn't look like my jaw is going all the way to the back of my head. So I'm going to trace. This is where some of my students and my children have a really hard time, and the reason why is because they've drawn, and they've drawn it very beautifully, and then they get really quick with the markering, like, let's hurry up and go. And we don't need to hurry up. We can take our time. Taking our time and going slow and paying attention to our lines will result in a very beautiful finished project. So it's easy for me to tell which lines I do not like. But once again, if you're going to have a hard time, erase those lines before you marker. Because I myself, oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot my hair. Because I have short hair, but I drew some long hair. Look, see, this happens. I am just going to add it in as best I can. So we're taking a mistake, and we are changing our plans and fixing it. We're turning it into something else. So that way this line will continue down into some hair. Yes, I actually have short hair, so you don't see it. It would probably fit underneath that cap just fine. And having different thickness of marker is good. I like to marker before and after coloring, and the reason why is because sometimes I go over the lines with my colors, and this way I can fix that a little bit, but I want to be able to erase all of those lines first. And you don't even have to trace. It just shows up really well when we trace. Okay, and then I've got my eye. I'm using a thick marker, and so the eye probably be a good place for a thin marker. But you work with what you got. So I'm adding that dark around the eye. Ooh! I kind of went a little overboard. That is okay. Okay, from here, I'm just going to erase. And I'm not going to worry about anything over here because this is going to get cut out, remember? So now all those guidelines that I left, I'm going to erase them. And so this is going to leave a lot of eraser shavings. And so what I tell my students, what I tell my kids quite frequently, is leave them on your paper, pick up, go over to the trash and dump it out. Like, let's not make a mess for somebody else. I'm in my studio, so this is my mess. I have this handy dandy little brush here that I use on my projects, and so all I'm doing is I'm putting it right on my floor because I'm going to vacuum. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to color it. I have some fantastic, they came out this year, 2020, I think one of the better things. I love these Colors Around the World crayons, and they give us lots of options, and that's what I love. I love being able to have students pick out colors that match them. Like, look, I'm making a mess. I'm just dumping them out. And what I would do is I would tell my students to, ooh, that is not my color. I would tell my students to put some on a paper and put their hand next to it and find which ones work well for them. And I've done this once before, so I know I'm actually going to use two colors because I feel that I have a lot of yellow and a lot of pink. And I found that I'll put one layer down, and I actually think I went with this one. Yep, a little darker. Put one layer down and go over the top with another layer, and it works out really, really well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here, and we'll come back when it is all colored and we're going to cut. Remember, plan out your patterns. I would also recommend not just doing what I did where I just put the pattern straight on here. I would practice a little bit. I would get out a scratch paper and just see different designs, practice your designs. I always tell my children that, hey, don't do something for the first time on your final project. So draw light until you get it right, and then we'll draw darker or trace with a marker, and then we can erase all those pencil lines. All right, so when you come back, you'll see something that does not necessarily look like this because it's a different drawing, and we will finish up. All right, so I have mine pretty much colored. I will show you, look down here. Oops, I'm going to color that in just a little bit better. I made a mistake. Typically what I would tell my students to do is to go ahead and plan it out. And honestly, what I would do is I would go in with pencil and I would put just the letter of the color that I wanted. And before I colored that section, I would erase it. That way I would make the mistake that I did here. So I was doing a pattern And then I started coloring and I'm like, oh, I didn't skip 2, I only skipped 1. So then what I did is I made this my centerpiece and then I worked out from there. So happy accident. I have my paper and I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to cut it out with you because I teach this to a lot of kids, and when we cut out, we move our paper. But what I see kids doing is they will just move their hand so the paper stays still, and then they're trying to just move their hand. This makes it a little bit more difficult, a lot more difficult to do curved edges. So you can put your paper in there and curve while you cut. I'm all for, if you're having a hard time, start cutting from a different direction. You don't have to make some of those weird angles. Also, if you have any students or if you yourself have a hard time cutting, your arm should be, you can't see my arm, but it is right up against my body. And I've taken balls or little animals, like a little friend, and just put them in between the arm and the side of the body and had my students hold that there while they are cutting, because it helps you be steady. It helps keep your scissors steady. And then you're cutting, you're moving your paper to cut instead. Because if I can't make my arm go all sorts of weird places, then I will move my paper. So there I have my self-portrait cut out, not a real self-portrait. I was thinking I should have added some gray to the hair. But since we use that piece of paper, it is going to fit right in here. So we've got the nice vibrant colors because it's on white paper. You can see I probably should erase that just a little bit better. Okay, normally what I would suggest is if you have glue stick, go ahead and use a glue stick. Glue sticks are great, especially if you've got a younger student or a younger child, the one that is purple and turns white, or any color, it'll turn a different color. I'm using regular glue, and the reason why is because I'm just going to show you, you don't need a lot of glue. So a little dot will really do. And that's all I want to do. If my glue will come out. This is a new glue. So I'm just going to put some dots around. If you notice, I'm not right at the edge, and that's the reason why is because when I smooth it down, that glue is going to spread out. And I'm actually probably using more glue than I need to. Sometimes I will tell my students and my kids to draw a very light outline with their glue. Dots are fine, outlining is fine, so whatever your preference is. And then I always just put a little bit in the middle. One thing that I found, which I thought was just awesome, and I haven't done this in my classroom, but I really should, and I do have a Sharpie, is, and I don't know where I got this. If I remember where I got this, I will be more than happy to post who showed me, just because they should get absolutely all the credit. But you draw a little face. Look, I'm gonna draw a happy face. Kinda. It worked better on my other glue. But I'm gonna, there. See, it's a smiley face. And when he's open, so open, no smiley face, closed. And so it's really nice and easy for kids to be able to see if their glue is open or not, because I have so many glue bottles that dry out because we've left them open. And so right now what I'm doing is I am just lining it up with the edges, and then I am smoothing it out. Just smoothing it out. And I'm going to go ahead and come back up here and add that detail. I'm going to outline my lines on my paper. So if I wanted to, I could come in here and I could outline this more if I wanted to. What I want to do though, so what I have told students in the past is to write their name in hieroglyphics. And in another video, I walk us through this so I know what my symbols look like. I'm going to write them in a Sharpie, but you could also use gold paint. You could use crayon. So there's a lot of options. I have gold paint pens. I bought a new box because I use these a lot. Yep, so it's running. And what I would do is I would honestly color in, like these four corners, I would color them in gold. I'm going to go ahead and put my name down here. And you know what? I'm going to do what I would tell any of my students or even my own kids. Draw it out first. Draw it light. Make sure that you're going to be happy with it. Make sure that you have proper spacing and balance. Oh, I'm still doing it with my marker, my paint pen. I didn't even think about that. Create a dot and a dot, a line, a straight line and a straight line attached with a curved line. And then I've got a curved line and a curved line. And that's my name. And this is how my name is spelt phonetically, because it is based on the sounds it makes. And then I would suggest continuing to add other hieroglyphics around it. So this is my first name. Maybe I would put my first name on the top and my last name on the bottom. Or maybe I would do Mrs. Or I could have actually done the image of a woman to signify that this is a woman. I could write reading or books because I love to read so much. I hope you do too. And then over here I could put art or painting or creating, because those are things that I love to do too. So I can make this more about me. So there's lots of options here. There's lots of things. You could actually do more of gluing. We could get some fun paper and we could have actually created something in our squares for that. You could use fun paper to cut out and put together for your pectoral decoration or for your crown. There is so many things you can do with this, and this is just what I did, but I would highly suggest adding more hieroglyphics. Well, I hope this was helpful. I'm excited to do this with my kids, and so I hope you enjoyed it. All right, be artsy.